Hi, how you doing?
Hanging in there. It's a good day. Good day to do a podcast. Always.
Always.
Awesome. And I'm awesome because the weather here is beautiful. And I went for a motorcycle ride last night.
Good for you.
It was only 20 minutes, but I can't wait.
That's awesome.
And the weather's unseasonably warm here. Today is supposed to get to 27 degrees.
That's crazy. Celsius, everybody.
But their record this week, I think it's like record-breaking warm temperatures. So it's just incredibly beautiful outside. It's lovely.
There for a while, winter.
Thinking 27 degrees Fahrenheit, and man, she likes cold weather.
Oh no, We're Celsius here.
Yeah, Celsius.
Well, I was just going to say in Nebraska, 27 sometimes is really warm.
Yeah.
It's been beautiful here. I went and got oil changed in my truck, so I left work and I sat out on the front bench of the place where my truck was and put my phone down, didn't do anything, and I just sat there with the sun beaming on my face. And it was like amazing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Let's talk about the myths of quilting. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right. Let's pop up our first one will be my machine likes a certain kind of thread. And I think this goes for both domestic machines and long arm machines.
Yeah, that is my least favorite statement that people say to me, surprisingly. And the reason is your machine doesn't have an opinion on anything. It's a machine. That being said, it's going to end up being the skills that you have, right? So yeah, if you don't know how to balance the tension on your machine with different threads, it's only going to want to use the thread that you know how to balance tension on. You have to be willing to play with your tension to get different threads to work.
Tracey, I think you have an opinion on this as well.
I am very opinionated about this. There are lots of factors, right? Mm-hmm. So I can completely see why, say you get a machine, all right? APQS, it doesn't matter what brand of machine. You get a long arm because that's pretty much, I don't know domestic machines anymore. I've got several, but I don't use them. And you load the thread that came with your machine and you're playing and you're used to it and you know, you're loving it and everything's going well. Say that's a 40 weight polyester thread. We're going to choose Glide only because Glide seems to be everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you pop in, you're going to work on your, you know, your free motion or custom quilting skills and you want a nice thin thread. So you throw in a 60, 80 or 100 weight thread and you change nothing. All you do is put in the different thread. You've got your 4.0 needle in there. That is fine for what you were using. But if you've got a 100 weight thread in there, you're not using a 4.0 needle, you're using a 3.5. You're going to have to back your tension off on the top because the thinner thread isn't as strong or durable. So you have to be a little more gentle with it. And you may need to change your thread path. Yeah. And as soon as people are willing to experiment with their thread path, play with their tension, and change the size of a needle, those are your components. So your machine will work anything from 100 weight silk to whatever, 28 polyester and all those, everything in between. It'll stitch on all kinds of fabrics through all kinds of things, including leather and all those other goody good things. You just have to be willing to change some of the other things other than just the thread, right?
And with experimentation comes learning lessons through failure, right? So through our failures, we learn how to adjust those tensions.
Oh yeah, you need to have negative experiences. If you're only having positive experiences, you're not really learning anything.
Right. And I think that's what happens with people though, right? Because everything's been going well and then they wanted to try something different and then there was some issues and they're not ready to deal with that. They just want to be able to quilt without having to play with all those things. Or it could be that people are possibly intimidated. I mean, like I've said before, when I got my first long arm, I had no help. There was not a lesson. There was no, wasn't even taught how to thread it. So that first year was not a lot of fun. So I had to figure all these things out. There was nowhere to go to get answers, right? I just kept trying. And I mean, I was screwing everything up. So what difference does it make if I'm playing with different threads too? But you learn those things along the way, right? And if you're willing to, experiment and not, don't change out a thread for the very first time, like one extreme to the other on your favorite quilt that you've been saving for 10 years to quilt on this thing. Like, that's not the time.
Right.
Practice cloth is a great thing.
Practice cloth and a notebook to write notes down.
For sure. Yeah. Like, I'm using King Tut thread. I don't want to have the barrel rolls. I don't want it to roll anywhere on my machine. Right. Make notes for yourself, for sure.
Well, and also not just notes, but there was a thought that I just escaped my brain. We'll keep on going.
If it pops back in, let us know.
Yeah, I know. It's been one of those days. That's a good thing. Well, I just feel like don't experiment on your most quilt that you've been, like Tracey said, for 10 years. Been waiting to get this baby done because you got your machine, you throw it on the long arm. I would highly suggest to practice, and then practice some more.
But I would say that's true of a domestic machine too, because you do have to play with tension a little bit, at least upper tension on a domestic machine. And you're not always going to get a perfect lock stitch when you change the threads you have, and you've got to understand how that machine works to be able to do that. It's not just long arm quilting. Granted, there's more of it in long arm quilting because we're not just changing a number on our tension disc. We're rotating complete rotations, and multiple rotations to get something to balance. So it can be a little more intimidating on a long arm than it is on a domestic machine, but it's still there on a domestic machine.
Well, and I think from embroidery to long arms too, because I just had an embroiderer gentleman from another business down the road come into the store looking at our threads. And then he's like, well, why do you have so many different bobbin colors? Right. He didn't understand the different bobbin colors. I'm like, well, we change the color on the back of the thread. And sometimes people like to match their threads. Sometimes they don't. But sometimes they want to match they would definitely want to match the fabric that's on the back. So that's why we have a lot of thread colors. And then we have a tension issue. And then, not issue, excuse me, but I feel like you can see a single stitch on quilting much more predominant than you can on embroidery.
So
for sure.
Yeah, embroidery pulls hard to the back, right? So you'll end up seeing the color of the top of your thread way back on the back of your thread. So it doesn't matter what thread you're using most of the time on embroidery for your bobbin color, because you're never going to see it. It's going to be inside whatever's being made.
Right.
And then it's also designed to pull way back. So yes, you have to be able to balance your tension too, but you're not balancing to get that perfect stitch where it's balanced on the front and the back. When you look on the back of the embroidery, it doesn't look balanced at all. That drove me nuts when I first got my embroidery machine, because I started out as a long armor and then went into the embroidery world. Right.
Oh, I think that would be crazy. But his mind was like, wow, you just blew my mind with all that. I'm going to go back to my world.
Go back to my world. And both worlds are great. Be in both worlds.
Right. And also too, I will say that this is my fleeting moment that I thought, as a piecer and having machines for sale and having classes here for piecing, I really feel, especially like Wonderful is changing the world. We always used to be cotton, 100% cotton while you're piecing, 100% cotton while you're piecing. And Wonderful has this great little video or picture of where they did 40 weight on the top and the bottom, and they're using polyester to piece, and it was a flying geese block. And then they did 80 weight in the bobbin and 40 weight at the top, and how much flatter it laid. And then they did 80 weight, and how completely flat that block laid. So I feel more and more my customers are coming in to buy the polyester for piecing, which is another crazy thought outside the box, but they love it. So it's a good thing.
I didn't piece with cotton thread when I pieced. I pieced with a thin polyester. And pro tip, instead of using a universal needle like the Schmetz universal needles, I always used to use a number 10 denim needle to piece because it's super sharp. It just makes things nicer. I always pieced with that.
Micro sharp, I think is what I used.
That's good.
But yeah, I always use sharp needles too.
Yeah.
But I piece on batiks, and I know you use a lot of batiks too, so we need a sharp needle, right? So
new needles too. New needles often. Another pro tip, right?
And there's another myth. I never need to change my needles. I mean, that's not one of the ones we listed, right? But oh my gosh, you need to change your needles. Right? Somebody asked me, how often do you change your needles? It's like on customer quilts, every quilt. I don't want an issue on a customer quilt. It's a cheap thing to change to make sure that customer quilt's going to go better, right? So I quilted one quilt that I changed over 20 needles on one quilt because they used Heat and Bond Ultra on it. And you could hear it get gunked up and go pop, 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 pop across that quilt. And I'm like, change the needle. There was no amount of alcohol that was getting that gunk off that needle. So I'm like, that was an expensive needle quilt. But one needle per quilt, you're talking pennies. Change the needle, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So
let's move on to our next one. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tracey.
Just before we do that, one thing I do want to say to anybody who's listening, the biggest problem with thinking that your machine only likes one thread is you're putting yourself in a corner and limiting yourself to only that brand or that type of thread.
Right.
You want to use all the threads so you can get all the looks and do all the things, because all kinds of thread, I mean, every different kind of thread, whether it's variegated or solid or shiny or matte or thin or thick or all those things, all have their place. So don't hold yourself in. Just try it. Everything's going to be fine. Promise.
All right. Yeah. Our next one is everybody's going to have an eye roll, probably who quilts for others. You can quilt that out, says there are customers, right?
Yep.
Tracey, you get to go first this time.
Well,
I went first last time.
Yeah.
I first last time. Cathy.
Yes, I'll do it. I'll step in. Yes and no. I can try to, in some fullness, quilt it out. But if it's super wonky and it's been pieced not so well, not necessarily. But I do want to say, when I get wonky quilts in my store, is I really honestly try to honor the customer where we are at or where they are at. And so I will say, if it comes in, and my staff knows if it comes in and there's some definite wonkiness, we kind of give them a heads up that there might be some quilting issues, but we will work really hard to not make them as much as we can.
So yeah, one of the things that's when I first started long arming, that people used to say is you can, and this may not be politically correct, but you can quilt out a B cup, but not a D cup, right? So, and that's the same idea, is how much it is. I talk to my customers up front and say, I don't judge my customers, but I say, we have some fullness on this quilt, so we have a choice here. We can quilt this flat, or we can try to quilt it square. It is not square at the moment. So if I try to make it, actually have everything straight, you can see where I'm going to get, this extra right here. So, you have a choice in this life. You can bind a quilt that's not square, right? But we're going to have some pleats if we try to make this thing square, right? So, but just be honest with them and say, yeah, I can try for you. Most of the time we can quilt them without getting pleats on them if we're not trying to make them square, right? But yeah.
Right. If we're not trying to make them square. Exactly. Educate.
Yeah. And I have customers that are completely okay with it not being a square when they get done. They're like, it's going to be over somebody, who cares? Now, if it's hanging on my bed, I want it to look square, right? If it's on my wall, I want it to look square. But if it's going to be a lap quilt, it may not be important to that customer.
Tracey?
I use the steam. I steam.
Yeah.
The steam method. I'd say starch and steam, but I don't really use starch. I use just steam.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been known to steam and use a hot blow dryer, blow dryer. And there's a lot of fullness you can tame with steam. Yeah.
There's definitely some tricks. We have a big, a steam generator, one of the ones that they would use in a dry cleaner, or, a nice dress top so I got a big steamer for the showroom. When I was at home, I just used my handheld steamer. Steam is awesome. It will eat up quite a bit of it.
Yeah,
but like you, if I used anything, it would be like, the flattened best press type, not starch based.
That's what I used to use rather than starch. But I've had rental customers here where they're getting, it starts to develop or whatever, and we're working some stuff in. And when I get my little iron out and I say, watch this.
It's like, what?
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
It does. Yeah. It takes out a lot of extra fabric.
It does. It makes things manageable. And you may have to do it. You may only need to just, right?
Yeah.
And it just knocks it in, or you may have to do it a couple times. I found when I added the blow drying, first of all, I don't have to wait for the moisture from the steam before we can drive over it. But the blow dryer on high heat also helps pull things in a little bit. And then I would just blast it with the cold air just because it's faster than waiting for the fabric to cool off. It doesn't take care of everything, but it takes care of 90%.
I don't iron my backing. That can be controversial with long armors. I don't. I load them onto my frame and steam them.
Yes. We missed them. Yes.
Yeah, well, I can mist them, but I just use my steamer real quick because I have one. So it's super quick. But yeah, I used to mist them and then use the tension of the rollers to actually pull it straight while it was. And we are talking barely misted, guys. Don't get your leaders wet, right? Same thing with steam. Like Tracey, I can put a fan on it here. It's already hot where I am. But it's, you steam them or you mist them and get them up all onto your take-up roller and then roll them backwards to get a tight thing. But yeah, that's like the best thing I've ever purchased is a steamer.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
And the Roomba. Yeah.
Really?
My staff would say it's the Roomba. It's the Roomba.
We just got one of those. Bunny Buster is her name. She got stuck on some fabric last night and didn't do her job. So we had to, it's all good.
She was petting fabric. She was made to be in a quilt store. I'm just saying.
That's true. All right. Angela, this question's for you.
Yeah, no, you don't. Okay, so most of you know by now that I'm a computer person. I was not the artist in my family. My mother obviously is a quilter. She also is a painter. My sister did pastels growing up. So they are the artist, what I would consider the artist in my family. I'm a computer tech person. I am not artistic. And yet the first 6 years I owned a long arm, all I did was free motion quilting from the front of my frame. And I had a waiting list like you wouldn't believe. So do you need to be an artist? Absolutely not. You need to teach yourself 6 to 7 shapes and learn how to join those shapes together. It's not about being an artist at all. It is about learning the shape you want to draw. You actually want to quilt, right? And then taking the time to practice and doodle. I mean, watch Tracey's videos. Oh my word. I mean, you're going to learn so much off of her YouTube channel because that's all she's teaching you. Well, not all she's teaching you. That's what she's teaching you over and over and over again is to learn your shapes and practice.
So right, no Tracey? Need to be an artist to be a free motion quilter, right,
no,
Tracey?
You do not.
It's all learned.
I still can't draw anything but quilting designs. I'm just saying.
Don't ask me to draw a tree. Actually, no, I can draw trees. That was a bad example.
Well, but yeah, but like, don't
I'll
ask
edit
me to
that
draw
out.
a realistic cow. That's not my job. That's not my job.
No. Artist, the word artist applies to so many different things and so many different genres and applications and modalities. And
Because I would say that all three of us are long arm artists. Like, we can do things with our long arm that, we will, like, we've all won awards in our long arm quilting. So we know that we know our art, what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
Right. But we're not, like, I'm not Monet. I don't want to be Monet. Honestly, I don't want to put the practice in. I don't like getting that dirty. Like, people who use paints end up with paint everywhere. I can handle the linen fiber. I can't handle the messy paint.
I would like that. Just
You would like that. So yeah. So I mean, part of it is knowing what you can and can't deal with in your life. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I would say your sketchbook. My sketchbook doesn't reflect necessarily my quilting either. I feel like the stark white and the pencil or whatever I'm using is harsher than the thread where I'm matching the colors and all of the other stuff. So I feel those are also two different worlds. So I can't judge my quilting on my sketchbook per se. My sketchbook helps me to be a better quilter for sure.
It teaches me the path. I'm not worried about the shapes in my sketchbook because that's not where my skill set is. Even though I do sketch a lot and I have a sketchbook with me most of the time, that's not where I put my practice in, right? My practice is on that long arm. So I know if I can get it even close in that sketchbook, it's going to look fabulous when I quilt it. And that's
quilting will always look better than the doodling in the book.
Yeah.
Smoother, cleaner, all those things.
Yeah.
All right. And I think we have one more question. Left that one up just a little bit long. Sorry about that. So our last question, as a machine owners, we get to quilt whenever we want.
How many of us thought that would be the thing when we bought a machine? I mean, I did. I thought I would get to quilt, and yeah. And then we all giggle because we're like, no.
Right.
And it's the shoemaker's kids and the mechanic's car, and
yeah, for sure. And all three of us are running businesses, and a lot of long armers are running business, or you just have other things going on in your life, right? So we don't get to quilt whenever we want to, and that's okay, right? I get to quilt right now I'm not getting to quilt at all, guys. So I would love to tell you I get to quilt when I want to, but that's not the case right now. I have other responsibilities I have to address and have to be done before I get to quilt. So right now, I would say schedule your time, like schedule time for yourself to actually quilt, because my schedule can get overwhelming very quickly, and I can go months without even seeing my machines right now. And that doesn't make me happy. So I'm trying to schedule my time so that I can actually get into my showroom more often, and see my machines, and then also schedule time to quilt. And that was part of my idea with us doing the projects of the month, was that I would actually get to, be on my long arm a little bit, instead of just doing computer work. So yeah.
I mean, I choose to do customer quilts, which is quilting, and I love it. But I mean, and I love every second of it. I love every second of it. Don't get me wrong. It's just for myself every once in a while. It touches my soul when I can go do something fun for me. It touches my soul more than my customer quilts. My customer quilts I love to do, and I enjoy every moment. That's why we halfway joke when we deliver a long arm. We halfway joke in our store, and I'm sure you guys do as well. If you want your neighbors to know, we'll come during the day, and if you don't want them to know, we'll drop it off in the dark.
Even that with that trucks, that would be hard. That's like a fabric brush truck. You can hear it when it's coming, right? And it's beautiful. So.
But you know, I'm trying to say we would always joke if you want us to, like, you know, kind of thing. Because even when I worked for my basement and I would go to church and everybody would be like, oh, Cathy. And I'd be like, I just want to go pray, which is fine. And I love my job. Again, I'm making fun of a situation.
Yeah. So. I mean, I do love what I do. It's just progressed into something that I wasn't necessarily expecting it to progress into. When I became a long arm quilter, I thought I would be working for myself out of my house. And, you know, working when I wanted to. I didn't realize I was going to end up with pretty much another tech job, right? Which is great. And it's in the quilting industry and I love it. But yeah, when you look at how our lives have morphed since we first started, I think all of us started out quilting in our house. Right. Like you two were in your basements. We don't do basements in North Carolina. So I was in something called a frog, finished over garage.
Oh, yes. I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I really, and the house that I'm in now, we specifically bought because there was a room that's on a slab behind our garage that I could have my long arms in so that people who were coming in to look at long arms weren't having to go upstairs. So we did build this house, but it was partially built when we signed on it, and it had, you know, a 500 square foot bonus room that's on behind the garage. And that's one of the reasons we bought it, because we were looking for somewhere I could run my business and have my long arms on concrete. We did look at some like walkout basements and things like that, but those are pretty rare here. So yeah. And plus you have to go downstairs then. So it's just the opposite issue with having people be able to look at long arms. So, but even then I did that. And we built this house, and within 5 years I was in a showroom. So I'm like, we could have stayed in the original house. We didn't need to buy a new house. Yeah, but oh well, life goes on, right?
Right.
There were other reasons too, but yeah, you know, it's interesting to see where our lives have progressed since we started. And no, we don't get to quilt all the time.
But we get to talk about quilting all the time. So that's even more joyful.
We do get to talk about it all the time. Yeah.
It'd be kind of exciting to see where we go in the future on this journey. I'm excited because that excitement of where we're going to and not being the same is, as a military spouse, is and moving around a whole bunch in my whole lifetime, being married to my husband, which will be 35 years, like AKA this summer. Wow. I'm kind of just I love the challenge of what has to come and how we can grow, but also how we can help serve our fellow quilters, right? I think we all have that beautiful gift of wanting to help other quilters, because that's ultimately this goal of the whole podcast and everything that we're doing, the Quilting Academy, all of that good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
We learn best from you. So you guys tell us your myths, and we will maybe have some great conversations around those in the future. That would be fabulous.
Yeah. And your comments help us build content. So definitely comment.
Well, Tracey, you better get outside and enjoy that motorcycle.
Mm-hmm. After work, perhaps. Not today. I have to go to a customer's house after when I close the shop this afternoon. I have to go out and do a service call. So tomorrow after work.
Well, that's what Jacob is doing right now. The Bashmobile is on the loose again today. We delivered a long arm yesterday, and today it's out. He fixed an Ultima 1. Isn't that just amazing? And did a spa treatment on it and got a new needle bar and sending her back out, and she purrs like a kitten. It was beautiful.
Awesome. That's fabulous.
It's, for those of you who don't know, an Ultima 1 is about a 35-year-old long arm. So we know these things.
Sorry. Thank you, Angela, for double checking. So our people all understand.
35 years.
Yeah. So they're still running.
They are. They are workhorses.
Well, because there's the electronics on them are so minimal to the fact that it just stitches. And it's fabulous. Hey, ladies.
See you later.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.